The medical room smelled like clean metal and medicine. Zrakth sat in the special chair made for his kind. His forearms shook a little as he looked across the table. The human doctor had kind eyes, but Zrakth still felt afraid. Dr. Elena Voss wrote something on her tablet. She looked up at the alien sitting across from her. Zrakth was big, even sitting down. His blue skin had many scars. Some were old battle wounds. Others looked like they came from medical work to fix broken bones. "Thank you for coming today," Dr. Voss said. Her voice was soft. "I know this is hard for you." Zrakth nodded with his large head. "The Galactic Council said I must tell my story. For the records." His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. But his words were clear. "We can stop any time you need to," the doctor said. "This is for the War Crimes Tribunal files. Other people need to understand what happened during the war." The alien's forearms moved in a pattern. Dr. Voss knew this meant he was thinking hard about something painful. She had worked with many war survivors. Zrakth was different, though. Most aliens who survived the human-Zephyrian War were angry or sad. Zrakth seemed scared. "I was Sub-Commander Zrakth of the Imperial Fleet," he began. "My ship was the Honored Blade. We were one of the best crews in the Empire." He stopped and looked at his hands. 2 of them had only 3 fingers now. The others were missing parts of fingers. "Before the war, I thought I understood fighting. We Zephyrians have rules for battle, honor codes that go back thousands of years. We fight to show our strength. We fight to protect our families. We fight to gain territory. But we always fight with honor." Dr. Voss nodded. She had read about Zephyrian culture. They were a proud people. Their military was based on old traditions. Soldiers were expected to die before showing fear. Victory meant nothing if it came without honor. "Tell me about first contact with humans," she said. Zrakth made a sound that might have been a laugh, but there was no joy in it. "We thought they were children playing with toys. Their ships were small and ugly. Their weapons were simple. They had just learned to travel between stars." He paused and rubbed one of his scars. "Our leaders sent scouts to watch them. The humans had found some planets with good mining. Planets that we wanted. The Galactic Council said humans were under protection. New species get time to grow before others can challenge them. But your people ignored this rule?" "Yes." Zrakth's voice became quiet. "Our pride was too great. We thought humans were too weak to matter. How could such a young species stop the mighty Zephyrian Empire?" The doctor wrote more notes. "What did your commanders think the war would be like?" "Fast and easy," Zrakth said right away. "We expected to arrive with our fleet, show our power. The humans would see they could not win. They would give us the planets, and thank us for being merciful." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, ships from many different worlds came and went from the space station. Humans walked next to aliens of all kinds. Everyone seemed peaceful. Our military planners said the war would last maybe 1 cycle. About 3 months in human time. We had better ships, better weapons, better training. We were warriors with thousands of years of fighting experience. Humans had been in space for maybe 50 years. Dr. Voss watched him carefully. But it didn't go as planned. No. The word came out like a whisper. It did not. Zrakth turned back to face her. His large eyes looked tired. "We studied human military records before we attacked. They fought wars on their home planet for thousands of years. But they were small wars. Limited wars. They had rules about who could fight and how. What kind of rules? They tried not to hurt non-fighters. They had agreements about treating prisoners. They didn't use certain weapons because they were too cruel. We thought this proved they were weak." The alien sat back down. All 4 of his arms rested on the table now. "We were very wrong about what those rules meant." Dr. Voss leaned forward. "How do you mean?" "We thought the rules meant humans were soft, afraid to do what was needed to win. We did not understand that humans made rules to control themselves, to stop themselves from doing things that scared even them." A long silence filled the room. The doctor could hear the hum of the space station's engines. Ships moving in the distance. Normal sounds of a peaceful place. "When did you first realize you were wrong about humans?" she asked. Zrakth closed his eyes. The first battle. We arrived at their mining colonies expecting surrender. Instead, we got a message that changed everything. What did it say? "Come and take it." The alien's voice was barely a whisper now. 3 words that should have warned us. Should have made us stop and think. But we were too proud to listen. Dr. Voss waited. She could see that Zrakth was remembering something terrible. We thought it was just brave talk from people who knew they were about to die. We laughed about it on the command deck. "Come and take it," we said to each other. "We will." He opened his eyes and looked directly at the doctor. We did not understand that when humans say something like that, they mean it. They mean they will make you pay for every inch. They mean they will turn taking it into the hardest thing you ever tried to do. And that's when the real war began? "No," Zrakth said, shaking his head. "That was when we learned that everything we thought we knew about war was wrong. That was when we learned what humans really are when they decide to fight." The medical room felt colder now. Dr. Voss looked at her notes and prepared for the rest of the story. She had a feeling the worst parts were still coming. Dr. Voss refilled Zrakth's water cup. The alien drank slowly, using 2 of his hands to hold the large container. His other hands moved in nervous patterns on the table. "Tell me about the first battle," she said gently. Zrakth set down the cup. "The Kepler mining colonies. We came with 12 warships, our best ones. The human colonies had maybe 30 small ships, cargo haulers and mining vessels mostly. No real weapons that we could see." He was quiet for a moment. Then he continued. "Admiral Vorak sent the standard message. Surrender now, and we will be merciful. Give us the planets, and no one needs to die. Simple and clean. But the humans refused? Worse than refused. They sent back a video message." Zrakth's voice became tight with old fear. It was a human male. Maybe middle-aged. He wore work clothes. Not a uniform. Behind him we could see families loading onto ships. Dr. Voss wrote notes. "What did he say?" "He said his name was Marcus Chen. He was the colony administrator." Then he looked right at the camera and said, "We got your message. Here's our answer." He held up one finger. Not the greeting finger, the rude one. The alien shook his head. Then he said, "You want our homes? Come and take them. But know this. We're not soldiers. We're miners. We don't know the fancy rules of war you probably follow. We just know how to break things and blow stuff up. Hope that works for you." Dr. Voss looked up from her notes. "That must have seemed strange to your people." "Strange?" Zrakth made that sound without joy again. "We thought it was funny." Admiral Vorak laughed on the command deck. "Miners? Against the Imperial fleet?" he said. "This will be over in an hour." But it wasn't. No, it was not. Zrakth stood and paced to the window again. We moved into attack position. Our plan was simple. Destroy any ships that resisted. Land troops on the main colony. Show our strength until they gave up. He turned to face the doctor. The first strange thing happened when we fired warning shots at their ships. Instead of running away or shooting back, they scattered like insects. No formation. No plan we could see. Just chaos. That doesn't sound very effective. That's what we thought too. Until we realized they weren't running away. They were moving to positions we couldn't predict. Because there was no military logic to it. Zrakth sat back down heavily. Then the real nightmare began. One of their cargo ships, a big, slow thing, suddenly appeared right next to our scout vessel. The Swift Honor. But the cargo ship was moving wrong. Too fast. Like it was falling. Dr. Voss frowned. Falling? In space? That's what I thought too. Then I understood. They had turned off their engines and used gravity from the nearest planet to speed up. They crashed into the Swift Honor like a hammer. A suicide attack? We thought so. Very dishonorable. But humans were new to space warfare. We expected some desperation. Zrakth rubbed his scars again. But then we got a signal from the cargo ship. It was still functional. The humans had somehow calculated the crash to disable our ship without destroying their own. That seems very advanced for miners. That's what scared us. These weren't soldiers with years of training. They were ordinary people with mining equipment and engineering knowledge. But they used it like weapons. Zrakth's forearms moved faster now. Dr. Voss recognized the sign of growing stress. What happened next? The Swift Honor sent a distress call. Admiral Vorak ordered 2 more ships to help. But when our rescue ships got close, the humans did something we had never seen before. What? They used mining explosives. But not normal ones. They had somehow connected dozens of small charges and spread them in a wide area around our damaged ship. When our rescue vessels came near, Zrakth stopped talking. His breathing became faster. Take your time, Dr. Voss said softly. After a minute, he continued. The explosions weren't meant to destroy our ships. They were meant to push them into each other. Like pool balls on a table, our own rescue ships collided and damaged each other. The humans used your rescue attempt against you? Yes, and they did it with mining equipment, tools for breaking up asteroids. Nothing military about it. Dr. Voss made more notes. How did your people react? Admiral Vorak was angry, but not worried yet. He thought the humans had gotten lucky. He ordered all ships to attack at once. Overwhelming force. End this quickly. I'm the noun. I'm the matter, men. And did it work? Zrakth laughed, but the sound was bitter. The humans seemed to expect this. When our fleet moved forward together, they did something that still gives me bad dreams. What? They turned their mining station into a weapon. The whole thing. It was huge, maybe 2 kilometers across. They somehow moved it into our path and turned on all the mining lasers at once. Dr. Voss looked confused. Mining lasers aren't weapons. No, they're not. They're for cutting up rocks. But humans used them like a sword. One giant blade of energy that could cut through our ship hulls like paper. That's creative. Creative. Zrakth repeated the word like it tasted bad. That's what the humans were. Creative. We had studied thousands of battles from dozens of species. No one had ever used civilian equipment as military weapons before. Because most species have separate military and civilian technology? Because most species think there is a difference between the two. Humans see tools. If a tool can break rocks, it can break ships. If a tool can move cargo, it can ram enemies. If a tool can build things, it can build traps. The alien was sweating now, even though the room was cool. But the worst part was still coming, he said quietly. Worse than being attacked by mining equipment? Much worse. Because that's when we realized the humans weren't just using their tools as weapons. They were learning to use our weapons too. Dr. Voss stopped writing. How? They captured one of our fighters. The pilot was killed in the crash, but the ship was mostly intact. We expected them to study it, maybe try to copy the technology later. But they didn't. 2 hours later, that same fighter came back, flying toward our fleet. We thought someone had rescued it. Then it crashed into our supply ship and exploded. They used your own ship as a suicide weapon? That's what we thought at first. But then, the second captured fighter came back. And the third. Each one aimed at a different target. Each one causing maximum damage. Zrakth put his head in his hands. They had somehow figured out how to fly our own ships and turn them into guided bombs. In hours. Not days or months. Hours. The room was quiet except for the sound of the alien's heavy breathing. That's when we knew, he said finally. This wasn't going to be a quick victory. This was going to be a nightmare. Dr. Voss brought Zrakth the small device that made calming sounds. The alien held it in one hand, while his other 3 hands stayed flat on the table. She could see he was trying to control his fear. The battles spread to other colonies after Kepler? She asked. Yes. Admiral Vorak called for more ships. The humans were stronger than expected, but we still thought we could win. We were wrong about everything. Zrakth activated the calming device. Soft music filled the room. The next colony we attacked was New Terra. Bigger than Kepler. More people. More ships. We thought this meant more targets and an easier victory. But the humans had learned from the first battle. They had learned. But not what we expected them to learn. The aliens' voice became quieter. We expected them to build better defenses. Maybe copy our ship designs. Instead, they learned about us. Dr. Voss looked up from her notes. What do you mean? They captured some of our people during the Kepler battle. We thought they would ask about our technology or our military plans. Instead, they asked about our families, our religion, our traditions, things that had nothing to do with fighting. That seems odd. We thought so too, until we got to New Terra and found out why. Zrakth closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When our fleet arrived, the humans were ready. But not with weapons. They had speakers. Huge ones pointed at our ships. Speakers, they started playing sounds at us. At first, we thought it was just noise meant to distract us. Then I realized what I was hearing. The alien's voice shook. They were playing Zephyrian funeral songs. Dr. Voss stopped writing. How did they know Zephyrian funeral songs? They had learned them from our captured people. But that wasn't the worst part. They had changed the words. Instead of honoring the dead, the songs talked about how we would die far from home, how our families would never know what happened to us. Psychological warfare. We had no word for it in our language. Zephyrians fight with honor. We attack ships and defend territory. We don't attack mines. Zrakth opened his eyes. But humans do. How did your people react? Some of our younger soldiers started crying. Others became angry and wanted to attack immediately. Our formations fell apart because no one could think clearly. Dr. Voss made careful notes. And this was intentional? Very intentional. While we were confused by the funeral songs, human ships attacked from 3 directions. Small, fast vessels that moved like hunting animals. They hit our engines and weapon systems, then disappeared before we could respond. Coordinated attacks while you were distracted. Yes. And they kept talking to us during the battle. Not threats or demands. They told stories. Stories? Stories about Zephyrians who had turned away from fighting. Warriors who chose peace over violence. They had somehow learned about our history and found examples of our people choosing different paths. Zrakth's hands moved in the nervous pattern again. This was very confusing for us. We are taught that warriors must fight until death, but these stories were about honored ancestors who chose not to fight. How could both things be true? The humans were trying to make you question your beliefs? They were showing us that our beliefs were more complex than our leaders told us. That we had choices we didn't know about. The alien stood and walked to the window again. At New Terra, something happened that changed the whole war. One of our captains, Voraktam of the ship Bright Sword, stopped fighting. He surrendered? No. Worse. He asked to speak with the human commander. In front of both fleets. On open channels so everyone could hear, Dr. Voss waited for him to continue. Captain Voraktam said he wanted to understand human warfare. He asked why humans fought without honor, why they used fear and tricks instead of strength and courage. What did the humans say? The human commander, I think her name was Admiral Kim, said something that still haunts me. She said, "Captain, we're not fighting for honor. We're fighting for survival. Honor is a luxury we can't afford when our children's lives are at stake." Zrakth turned back to the doctor. Then she asked Captain Voraktam a question that broke something in all of us. "What question?" she asked. "If your child was drowning and you could save them by breaking your honor code, what would you choose? Honor or your child's life?" The room became very quiet. Dr. Voss could hear the hum of the space station more clearly now. Captain Voraktam couldn't answer. Zrakth continued. Because the question showed him something terrible. Our honor code had no answer for that situation. We were taught that both honor and family were sacred. But what happens when you can't have both? And this conversation was broadcast to both fleets? Yes, every Zephyrian heard it. And many of us started thinking about our own families back home, about whether dying for honor would really help them. Zrakth sat back down. That's when the humans started their real attack. Not on our ships. On our certainty. Efterkly, how? They started broadcasting human stories. Music, art, philosophy. All focused on one idea. That people could change. That what you were born to be wasn't what you had to stay. And this affected your people? It terrified our commanders. Because Zephyrian society is based on everyone staying in their place. Warriors fight. Workers work. Leaders lead. No one changes. But the human broadcasts suggested change was possible, not just possible. Normal. Human history was full of farmers becoming generals. Workers becoming leaders. Even enemies becoming friends. Zrakth's voice was full of wonder now. For Zephyrians, this was like saying water could flow upward. Dr. Voss wrote quickly. How long did this psychological campaign last? Months. The battles continued. But everything was different now. Humans didn't just fight us, ship to ship, they made us fight ourselves in our own minds. And it was effective? More than they could have hoped. Zephyrian units started refusing orders. Not because they were cowards, but because they couldn't understand why those orders made sense anymore. The alien looked tired now. The humans had done something worse than defeat us in battle. They had made us doubt everything we believed about ourselves. Is that when you started questioning your own beliefs? Zrakth nodded slowly. Yes. When I heard that human admiral choose her child over honor, I thought about my own family. My mate and our younglings back on Zephyr Prime. What good would my honor do them if I died far from home? But you kept fighting? Yes. Because I didn't know what else to do. None of us did. His voice became sad. We were trained to be warriors, not thinkers. When thinking became necessary for survival, we were lost. And the humans knew this? The humans understood us better than we understood ourselves. They had studied not just our technology and tactics, but our minds and hearts. They knew exactly which questions would hurt us the most. Dr. Voss finished her notes for this section. What happened next? Next, the war came to our home, and we learned that everything we had seen so far was just the beginning of what humans could do when they decided to win. The calming device had stopped working. Zrakth's hands shook as he set it aside. Dr. Voss could see sweat on his blue skin despite the cool air in the room. We need to talk about Zephyr Prime, she said gently. But we can stop if you need to. No. People need to know what humans are capable of. What they did to end the war. His voice was barely a whisper. I was there when they came to our home world. Dr. Voss prepared her tablet for what she suspected would be the hardest part of the interview. By that time, how long had the war been going on? 2 years. 2 years of losing battles we should have won. Of questioning beliefs we had held for thousands of years. Of watching human tactics spread through our own forces like a disease. Some Zephyrians were using human methods. The ones who survived were. The ones who still followed only the old ways. Zrakth made a gesture that Dr. Voss didn't recognize. They died with honor. But they died. And your people's morale? Broken. We had started this war to prove Zephyrian strength. Instead, we had proven that humans could take everything we valued and use it against us. Our honor codes, our traditions, our loyalty to family. All of it became weapons in human hands. Zrakth stood and paced to the far side of the room. When the human fleet finally reached Zephyr Prime, we expected a massive battle. Thousands of ships attacking our strongest defenses, a final test of strength. But that's not what happened. What happened was worse than any battle. The humans didn't come with a war fleet. They came with everything else. Dr. Voss looked confused. What do you mean? cargo ships, passenger vessels, old mining ships, construction equipment, even some ships that looked like they were held together with metal tape and hope. The alien's voice became strained. It looked like a refugee convoy, not an invasion force. Were they carrying supplies for a long siege? That's what our military leaders thought. Admiral Vorak ordered our fleet to attack while the human ships were scattered and vulnerable. It should have been easy to destroy them before they could organize. But it wasn't easy. Zrak stopped pacing and faced the wall. The cargo ships were empty. The passenger vessels had no passengers. The mining ships carried no mining equipment. What did they carry? Questions. Thousands and thousands of questions. His voice cracked slightly. The humans had spent 2 years learning everything about Zephyrian culture. Every custom, every belief, every story we told our children. And they had prepared questions about all of it. I don't understand. They didn't attack our cities or our military bases. They attacked our television stations, our news networks, our schools. They took over our communication systems and started asking our own people questions. Dr. Voss stopped writing. They invaded your media. They replaced our regular programs with something they called discussion sessions. Humans would appear on screen and politely ask Zephyrians to explain their beliefs. That doesn't sound very threatening. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. Zrakth turned back to face her. Because the questions were designed to show contradictions in our society that we had never noticed before. What kind of contradictions? A human would ask. If honor is the most important thing, why do Zephyrian leaders send others to die while staying safe themselves? Or, if family loyalty matters so much, why do warriors leave their children to fight for strangers? And your people tried to answer? Of course they did. But every answer led to more questions. Harder questions. Questions that made Zephyrians argue with each other. Instead of fighting humans, Dr. Voss was writing rapidly now. This was all planned, very carefully planned. The humans had identified every weakness in our social structure. Every place where our values contradicted each other. Every belief that didn't make sense when examined closely. And this was effective? Zrakth laughed bitterly. Within days, our home world was in chaos. Not from bombing or invasion, but from Zephyrians disagreeing with each other about what it meant to be Zephyrian. The humans had turned you against yourselves. Worse. They had made us think for ourselves for the first time in our lives. And thinking led to questioning. Questioning led to arguing. Arguing led to fighting among ourselves, while the human fleet waited safely outside our weapons range. The alien sat down heavily. But even that wasn't the end of it. What else did they do? They started showing us human children. Dr. Voss looked up from her notes. Children? On every screen, in every broadcast. Human children talking about their hopes and dreams, their favorite games, their love for their families. Just normal children being normal. Why was that significant? Because we had been taught that humans were monsters, evil creatures without honor or feeling. But these children looked just like Zephyrian children. They laughed the same way. They cried when they were sad. They hugged their parents when they were scared. Zrakth's voice became very quiet. And then the children started asking us questions too. What questions? Simple ones. A human child would appear on screen and say, "My daddy says your people want to hurt us. Why? We never did anything bad to you." Or my mommy says you think we're evil, but we're just kids. How can kids be evil? And how did your people react to that? Many Zephyrian adults started crying. Because they realized they had been fighting to protect their own children by trying to hurt someone else's children. The logic fell apart when they saw it that clearly. Dr. Voss set down her pen. This was psychological warfare on a level I've never heard of before. The humans had learned that Zephyrians would die for abstract ideas like honor and duty. But we couldn't hurt children for those same ideas. So they made the war about children instead of territory. Did your military try to stop these broadcasts? They tried. But the humans had taken over our communication systems so completely that stopping them would mean shutting down everything. No news. No emergency services. No contact with family members. Our leaders couldn't do that to their own people. So the broadcasts continued for weeks. And every day, more Zephyrians began to refuse to fight. Not because they were cowards, but because they couldn't explain to themselves why they were trying to hurt people who seemed so much like them. Zrakth rubbed his scars again. That's when I made my choice. What choice? I was commanding a ship in the defense fleet around Zephyr Prime. My orders were to attack any human vessel that came too close to our world, but I kept thinking about those human children. About my own younglings back home, and a human ship approached my position. Just one small vessel, no weapons that I could see. I should have destroyed it immediately, but you didn't. I opened a communication channel instead. I asked them what they wanted. Dr. Voss leaned forward. What did they say? They said they wanted to talk. Not to my commanders or my government. To me. To understand why I was fighting. And whether I really wanted to continue. Did you talk to them? For 3 hours. The longest conversation of my life. They asked about my family, my dreams, my fears. They treated me like a person, not an enemy. And this changed your mind? It made me realize that my mind had already been changed. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. Zrakth looked directly at Dr. Voss. By the end of that conversation, I knew I couldn't fire on that ship. I couldn't hurt people who cared about their children as much as I cared about mine. What did you do? I surrendered. Not just my ship, but myself. I asked the humans to take me prisoner. And they agreed? They did something I never expected. They asked if I wanted to help end the war. To save lives on both sides. Dr. Voss made final notes on this section. And that's how you became a defector? That's how I learned that humans don't want enemies. They want everyone to be safe. Even the people who had been trying to kill them. The room was quiet for a long moment. The war ended soon after that? Dr. Voss asked. Within months. Once enough Zephyrians saw that humans treated prisoners better than our own leaders treated soldiers, the fighting just stopped. And now you live among humans? Now I try to understand what they taught me. That being strong doesn't mean hurting others. That being brave doesn't mean never being afraid. That being honorable doesn't mean following rules without thinking. Any regrets? Zrakth considered the question carefully. I regret that it took a war to learn these things. But I don't regret learning them. Dr. Voss looked at her notes. Hours had passed since the interview began. Outside the window, the space station's artificial day was ending. Lights dimmed to simulate sunset. She could see Zrakth was tired, but there were still questions that needed answers. We've talked about the war itself, she said carefully. Now, I need to ask you about what happened afterward. How did humans treat Zephyrian prisoners and defectors? Zrakth's 4 hands moved in a pattern she now recognized as surprise. That might be the strangest part of the whole story. Strange how? We expected punishment. Execution maybe. Or slavery. Or torture. That's what we would have done to human prisoners if we had won. The alien's voice was thoughtful now. Not fearful. Instead, they gave us medical care. Just medical care? Food, shelter, education. They helped us contact our families back home. They even provided Zephyrian music and art to make us feel less homesick. Dr. Voss made notes. This was part of their psychological warfare strategy? No, that's what I thought at first too. I kept waiting for the cruel treatment to begin. For them to start asking for military secrets or demanding loyalty oaths. Zrakth shook his head, but it never happened. What did happen? They offered us choices. We could return home when the war ended. We could stay and help build peace between our peoples. We could even help them understand other alien species they might encounter. And you chose to stay? I chose to learn. For the first time in my life, I was allowed to ask questions without being told that questioning was dishonorable. Dr. Voss studied the alien's face. What did you learn? That everything I thought I knew about strength was wrong. Zephyrians believe strength means never showing weakness, never backing down, never changing your mind. And humans think differently? Humans think strength means doing whatever it takes to protect the people you care about, even if that means looking weak, even if that means changing everything you believed before. Zrakth stood and walked to the window one last time. During the war, I thought human tactics were brutal because they didn't follow our honor codes. I thought they were cruel because they attacked our minds instead of just our bodies. But now you see it differently? Now I understand that humans weren't being brutal. They were being desperate. And desperate people will use any tool that works to save their families. Even psychological warfare? Especially psychological warfare. Because it's the only kind of fighting where everyone can survive. The alien turned back to face her. Think about it. If humans had just used bigger weapons and stronger ships, millions would have died on both sides. Instead, they used ideas and questions. People changed their minds instead of losing their lives. Dr. Voss considered this. So you're saying human brutality was actually mercy? I'm saying human brutality was intelligence. They found a way to win without destroying their enemies. They turned us into allies instead of corpses. But surely some Zephyrians see it differently. Some who still believe the humans were wrong. Zrakth was quiet for a long moment. Some do. Mainly the ones who never experienced human kindness directly. The ones who only heard stories about the war, instead of living through it. And what do you tell them? I tell them what happened 3 years after the war ended. When the Void Harvesters came. Dr. Voss looked up sharply. The Void Harvesters? The extragalactic threat? Yes. When that fleet of machines arrived to consume all organic life in our galaxy, who do you think developed the defense strategies that saved us all? The humans? Partly. But mostly it was humans working with former enemies. Zephyrians who had learned human tactical thinking. Kragath who had adopted human psychological methods. Selenites who had combined their natural abilities with human creativity. The war prepared the galaxy for a larger threat? The war taught us all how to think like humans when survival was at stake. How to use any tool available. How to work with anyone willing to help. How to change everything about ourselves if that's what it took to live. Dr. Voss was writing rapidly. So the human methods that seemed so brutal during the war became the foundation for the alliance that saved galactic civilization. Zrakth sat back down. When the Void Harvesters arrived, they expected to find scattered species fighting each other according to traditional rules. Instead, they found a unified force that fought like humans. Creative, adaptive, willing to use any advantage, ruthless when necessary, merciful when possible, and absolutely determined to survive no matter what the cost. And the Void Harvesters couldn't handle that? They were machines designed to defeat predictable military responses. They had no programming for enemies that would turn anything into a weapon. Ally with anyone willing to help. And change tactics faster than they could adapt. Dr. Voss finished her notes on this section. So looking back, do you believe humanity's methods during the war were justified? Zrakth considered the question for a long time. I think that's the wrong question. What's the right question? The right question is, what did humans do when they won? And what did they do? They helped us rebuild. They shared their technology. They treated former enemies as potential friends. They proved that their brutal methods during the war came from love for their own people, not hatred for everyone else. And that makes a difference? All the difference in the galaxy. Zrakth's voice was strong now. Humans fight like demons when threatened. But they build like angels when safe. The same creativity that made them terrifying enemies makes them wonderful allies. Dr. Voss looked through all her notes. One final question. If you could go back and prevent the war from happening, would you? Zrakth was quiet for several minutes. Outside, the station's night cycle had begun. Stars were visible through the window, including the sun around which Earth orbited. No, he said finally. No. Even knowing the suffering it caused? Because of what it taught us. Before the war, every species in the galaxy thought they understood the limits of warfare. We all had rules about what was acceptable and what was too extreme. And humans changed that? Humans showed us that when survival is at stake, There are no rules except one. Protect the people you love by any means necessary. And you think that lesson was worth the cost? That lesson saved the galaxy when the real threat arrived. Every species that learned human methods survived the Void Harvester War. Every species that refused to adapt. Zrakth made a gesture, indicating loss. They didn't. So, humanity's brutality was actually preparation? Humanity's brutality was love expressed through desperation. And that combination, love and desperation, is the strongest force in the universe. Dr. Voss turned off her recording device. Thank you for sharing your stories, Zrakth. I know it wasn't easy. The alien stood and moved toward the door. Doctor, may I ask you something? Of course. Do you think humans know how terrifying they are? Dr. Voss smiled. I think humans know how much they love their children. Everything else follows from that. Zrakth nodded. Yes. That's what makes them so dangerous to their enemies. And so precious to their friends. He paused at the door. When you write your report, please make sure people understand. Humans aren't brutal because they enjoy violence. They're brutal because they refuse to let violence win. There's a difference. I'll make sure that comes through clearly. Good. Because the galaxy needs to remember what humans taught us. That sometimes the most merciful thing you can do is fight with everything you have. That sometimes love looks like war. And that sometimes the people who seem most brutal are actually the ones trying hardest to build a world where brutality isn't necessary. After Zrakth left, Dr. Voss sat alone with her notes. Outside, ships from dozens of species came and went peacefully. Humans worked alongside aliens of every kind. Former enemies had become friends, all because one species had refused to accept that any fight was fair when their children's future was at stake. She began typing her report. The galaxy needed to remember this story, not just what humans were capable of in war, but what they built in peace. Not just how they fought their enemies, but how they treated them afterward. The universe was vast and full of dangers. Someday, humanity's terrifying love might be needed again.